I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Prudence, Mark said, his voice tight as he set down his coffee mug with deliberate control. I'm your husband, not some financial predator. All I'm asking is why you won't add me to your new investment account, I replied, keeping my tone even despite the familiar tension building between us. We've always maintained transparency with our finances. He sighed dramatically. It's just a small side portfolio I'm experimenting with. Not everything needs to be a joint venture. His tone shifted, softening into something almost patronizing. You've never shown much interest in investment strategy before. Suddenly you're concerned about asset allocation. I held his gaze across our kitchen island, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows of our Seattle home, illuminating the growing distance between us. I'm concerned about the secretiveness, Mark. First the locked phone, then the private email account, now separate finances. These aren't the actions of someone with nothing to hide. His face hardened. After 15 years, I think I've earned a little privacy. If you can't trust me with something as basic as managing some investments without your supervision, maybe we have bigger problems. He stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. I'm late for work. We can continue this conversation about your trust issues another time. The front door closed with a decisive click, leaving me alone with my cooling tea and churning thoughts. My name is Prudence Westfield, 43 years old, a risk management consultant for insurance companies. I've built my career on identifying potential threats and creating protective measures before disaster strikes. My colleagues call me Prudence the Prescient for my ability to anticipate problems before they materialize. Ironic, then, that I'd been caught so off guard in my own marriage. Mark and I had met at a financial technology conference 16 years ago. He was charming, ambitious, and shared my appreciation for careful planning. We married a year later, built successful careers, and created a life that was comfortable, if not passionate. We'd decided early on not to have children, focusing instead on our professional goals and comfortable lifestyle. For 14 years, our partnership had functioned efficiently, like a well-managed investment portfolio, balanced, predictable, secure. Until 6 months ago, when Mark's behavior began to change in subtle but unmistakable ways. I pulled out my laptop and checked our joint account balances. Still healthy, no unusual withdrawals. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps there was a reasonable explanation for Mark's newfound secrecy. My phone buzzed with a security alert from our home monitoring system. I opened the app to see footage from last night, captured at 4:13 a.m. Mark standing over my desk, photographing my personal banking documents with his phone, his face illuminated by the blue light of his screen. Something cold settled in my stomach. This was worse than I had imagined. I've always been cautious with money, a trait inherited from my father, who lost everything in the 2008 financial crisis. I watched my parents' 30-year marriage collapse under the strain of financial ruin, my mother unable to forgive my father for not protecting them better. Always have your own safety net, she told me repeatedly during their bitter divorce, no matter how much you love someone. It was advice I had taken to heart, maintaining my own separate accounts even after marrying Mark. We shared joint accounts for household expenses and major purchases, but my personal savings, investments, and retirement funds remained solely in my name. Mark had similar arrangements, a system that had worked well for us, balancing togetherness with individual financial autonomy. Mark's background couldn't have been more different from mine. Raised in affluence by parents who indulged his every whim, he'd grown accustomed to material comfort. Still, he'd worked hard to build his career as a financial technology consultant, and I'd always respected his work ethic. His occasional impulsive purchases, the vintage motorcycle, the unnecessary upgrades to his home office, seemed harmless enough. We could afford his indulgences, and everyone deserves some pleasures. About 6 months ago, subtle changes began to appear. Mark started working later, keeping his computer screen angled away from me. He became defensive when I asked simple questions about household expenses. Then came the separate credit card I discovered accidentally while organizing tax documents, one I'd never seen before, with significant monthly payments from our joint account. It's for work expenses, he explained dismissively. The company reimburses me. Nothing for you to worry about. I trusted him, despite the faint alarm bells. After all, we'd built a life together based on mutual respect and honesty. Or so I believed. 3 months ago, the locked phone password appeared. 2 months ago, he started receiving mail at a P.O. box rather than our home address. 6 weeks ago, he began withdrawing unusual amounts of cash. $500 here, $700 there, just below the threshold that would trigger our joint account's large withdrawal alert. Investment opportunities, he explained vaguely when I inquired. Sometimes you need liquidity for the right moment. I nodded and pretended to accept his explanations, but privately I began paying closer attention. I installed a more sophisticated home security system with night vision cameras, citing recent break-ins in our neighborhood. I created elaborate spreadsheets tracking our finances, noting every discrepancy, every unexplained expense. I didn't want to believe my husband was deceiving me, but my professional instincts had been honed by years of identifying patterns of fraud. And Mark's behavior was setting off every alarm in my mental detection system. Still, I waited, gathering information, looking for concrete evidence before confronting him. I needed to be certain before accusing the man I'd shared my life with of betrayal. The 4 a.m. security footage of Mark photographing my banking information changed everything. No rational explanation could justify such behavior. I watched the clip repeatedly, studying his methodical movements as he sorted through my papers, carefully photographed my account numbers, passwords written in my personal shorthand, and monthly statements. That morning, after Mark left for work, I locked myself in my home office and began a comprehensive audit of all our financial accounts. Everything appeared normal at first glance. No unexplained transfers from our joint savings, no unusual credit card charges. But when I dug deeper into my personal accounts, the ones whose details Mark had photographed, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Someone had attempted to add a new user to my primary savings account, an authorized user with full access privileges. The request had been made online, using my credentials, but was pending approval via a confirmation process that required a phone call from the bank, a call I had not yet received. My hands trembled as I dialed the bank's fraud department. The friendly representative confirmed my suspicions. A change request had been initiated the previous day, attempting to add Mark as an account holder with full privileges. "Would you like to approve this request, Ms. Westfield?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "In fact, I need to report potential identity theft. I did not initiate this request." The implications were staggering. Mark wasn't just being secretive. He was actively attempting to gain access to my personal assets without my knowledge or consent. The betrayal cut deep, leaving me breathless with its magnitude. The bank representative was efficient and compassionate, helping me lock down my accounts, change all passwords, and place fraud alerts on my credit. "You should file a police report," she advised. "Even if you don't want to press charges, it creates an official record of the incident." I thanked her but hesitated. Filing a police report against my own husband seemed like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Despite everything, some part of me still hoped for an explanation, some misunderstanding that could salvage the ruins of our marriage. That evening, I confronted Mark. "Someone tried to add an authorized user to my personal savings account," I said carefully, watching his reaction over dinner. The bank flagged it as suspicious. His fork paused midway to his mouth, a flicker of something, surprise, alarm, crossing his face before he composed himself. "That's concerning. Did they say who?" The lie came so smoothly that I almost doubted what I knew to be true. Almost. "They're investigating," I replied, matching his casual tone. "I've changed all my passwords just to be safe." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Good idea. Can't be too careful these days." That night I lay awake beside him, listening to his even breathing, wondering how well I truly knew the man I'd married. What else was he planning? How far would he go? And perhaps most troublingly, why now, after 15 years of apparent contentment? I needed answers, and I needed protection. The next morning, I would take steps to secure my finances against whatever Mark was planning. This was no longer about saving my marriage. It was about saving myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Once Mark left, briefcase in hand and a perfunctory kiss on my cheek, I sprang into action. My first call was to Diane Blackwood, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on several fraud cases through my consulting business. Financial deception between spouses is unfortunately common, Diane said after I explained the situation. But attempting to gain unauthorized access to accounts is crossing into potential criminal territory. We need to move quickly. With Diane's guidance, I spent the day implementing financial safeguards. I moved funds from my compromised accounts to new ones at different banks. I froze my credit, changed every password, and set up advanced two-factor authentication on all accounts. I gathered all important financial documents and secured them in a safe deposit box at a bank where Mark and I had no relationship. "What about your joint accounts?" Diane asked during our follow-up call. "I've left them untouched for now," I replied. "I don't want to alert him that I'm onto his plans." "Smart," she approved. "We can monitor those accounts for unusual activity. If he thinks he's about to gain access to your personal savings, he might get careless with the joint funds." I also reached out to Jonathan Lewis, an attorney specializing in financial fraud. His advice was blunt. Document everything. Start building a case now, even if you're not sure where this is heading, and consider setting up a decoy. A decoy? A financial honeypot, he explained. A dummy account that appears valuable but contains limited funds. If he attempts to access it, you'll have irrefutable evidence of intent. Following his advice, I established new accounts with modest balances, enough to appear valuable, but not catastrophic if compromised. I deliberately left information about these accounts where Mark might discover it, complete with passwords written in the same shorthand system he'd photographed. For 2 weeks, I maintained a facade of normalcy while monitoring our finances obsessively. Mark seemed to notice nothing amiss, though he was increasingly absent, citing late meetings and client dinners. I nodded and smiled, playing the role of unsuspecting wife while privately documenting his every suspicious move. Then came the first unauthorized transaction, a $3,200 charge for a weekend at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, charged to one of my decoy credit cards. The reservation was for the following month, for 2 people. My name was not on the booking. When I casually mentioned I might join him for a work conference that same weekend, Mark didn't even blink. Bad timing, unfortunately. I'll be in back-to-back meetings with potential clients. Wouldn't see much of me anyway. The lies were becoming more brazen, yet confronting him directly seemed premature. Diane and Jonathan both advised patience, building an airtight case before making any accusations. "He hasn't accessed the main decoy account yet," Diane noted during our weekly check-in. "The credit card charges, while concerning, could be explained away as mistakes or misunderstandings. We need something definitive." I agreed, but found the waiting excruciating. Who was the second person on the Napa reservation? Was Mark planning to leave me once he secured access to my finances? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making sleep elusive and concentration difficult. Then, 3 weeks after discovering Mark's late-night photography session, I received an alert I'd been both expecting and dreading: a login attempt on my primary decoy account, followed by a transfer request for $65,000 to an unfamiliar account number. The trap had been sprung. Now I needed to discover just how deep Mark's betrayal went before confronting him with what I knew. But I'd underestimated his boldness, and the speed with which he would act once he believed he had access to my funds. The $65,000 transfer from my decoy account was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, a flurry of activity emptied the account: $12,000 for high-end electronics, $8,500 at designer boutiques, $3,500 for first-class airline tickets to Cabo San Lucas. The spending was frenzied and reckless, as if Mark feared the access might be revoked at any moment. Throughout it all, he maintained an impeccable facade at home. We shared meals, watched movies together, even made plans for a weekend getaway to celebrate our upcoming anniversary. The disconnect between his actions and his demeanor was dizzying. "He's escalating faster than we anticipated," Diane observed as we reviewed the latest transactions. "This isn't just opportunistic spending, it's systematic liquidation." "The question is, why now?" Jonathan mused during our conference call. "After 15 years of marriage, what triggered this sudden financial attack?" That question haunted me. Mark's behavior had changed 6 months ago, but something specific must have prompted his decision to actually steal from me. I began investigating Mark with the same methodical thoroughness I applied to my professional cases. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While organizing our home office, a task Mark always avoided, I discovered a hidden file folder tucked behind our reference books. Inside was a stack of medical documents, diagnostic reports, treatment recommendations, and insurance claims, all dated approximately 6 months ago. Mark had cancer, specifically a rare form of lymphoma that required aggressive and expensive treatment. Treatment his insurance would only partially cover, with estimated out-of-pocket costs exceeding $200,000. My mind reeled. Why hadn't he told me? We had the financial resources to handle this together. Instead, he'd chosen deception and theft over honesty with his wife of 15 years. I contacted Mark's doctor, presenting myself as his wife handling insurance matters. The receptionist was helpful. "Mr. Westfield has been responding well to treatment. His last checkup showed significant improvement, though of course he'll need to continue the maintenance protocol." "And the experimental treatment he was considering?" I asked, fishing for information. "Oh, he decided to proceed with that next month. It's not covered by insurance, of course, but he said financing wouldn't be an issue. Because he planned to finance it with my money." The realization was like a physical blow. I shared my discovery with Diane and Jonathan that evening. "This changes everything," Jonathan said gravely. "His motivation might generate sympathy, but the method remains criminal." "Cancer doesn't give you license to steal," Diane agreed, "especially from your spouse. He could have talked to you, worked out a plan together." Despite their reassurance, I felt conflicted. Mark was ill, potentially fighting for his life. Could I really proceed with exposing his fraud under these circumstances? My moment of hesitation evaporated the next morning when I checked the private investigator's report. I'd hired him on Jonathan's recommendation to determine who might be accompanying Mark on his various unauthorized trips. The report was comprehensive and devastating. Mark wasn't planning these excursions with a medical caregiver or healthcare provider. His companion was Vanessa Daniels, his 29-year-old executive assistant. Hotel records, restaurant reservations, and flight bookings confirmed they'd been traveling together for at least 4 months. Photos showed them in intimate situations that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. My husband was stealing my money not just for cancer treatment, but to finance a lavish lifestyle with his mistress. The dual betrayal crystallized my resolve. Whatever sympathy his medical condition might have warranted evaporated in the face of this complete breach of trust. It was time to confront Mark with exactly what I knew, and what I had done to protect myself from his calculated deception. I was reviewing the final documentation package with Jonathan and Diane when my phone buzzed with a security alert. Mark had just used my compromised credit card to make an $8,900 purchase at a high-end electronics store 15 minutes from our home. "He's getting bolder," Jonathan observed, "using the card locally when he knows you could potentially see the charge immediately." "He thinks I'm at work," I explained. I had maintained my normal schedule that morning, kissing Mark goodbye and driving away at my usual time. But instead of going to my office, I'd met with my legal team to finalize our strategy. "This might be the perfect opportunity for confrontation," Diane suggested, catching him literally with the goods in hand. I agreed. After 15 years of marriage, I deserved to see Mark's face when he realized his scheme had failed. When I arrived home, Mark's car wasn't in the driveway yet. I positioned myself in our living room, the comprehensive evidence folder on the coffee table before me. Bank statements, security footage, private investigator reports, medical records. a complete documentation of his double life. At 2:37 p.m., I heard his key in the door. He struggled to enter, laden with shopping bags emblazoned with the logos of premium electronics brands. He didn't notice me at first, busy arranging his purchases on the entryway table with obvious satisfaction. "Successful shopping trip?" I asked, my voice calm despite the thundering of my heart. Mark startled, nearly dropping the sleek box he was removing from a bag. "Prudence, you're home early." "As are you." I nodded toward the packages. "Nice things." He recovered quickly, a practiced smile replacing his initial surprise. "Just some upgrades for my home office. The consulting business is taking off. Thought I deserved to invest in proper equipment." "With my money?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, quickly masked. "What are you talking about? I used my own funds." "No, Mark. You used the credit card connected to my decoy account, the one I created after I caught you photographing my banking information at 4 a.m. 3 weeks ago." The color drained from his face, but he rallied with unexpected indignation. "You've been spying on me? Setting traps?" "Protecting myself," I corrected. "As it turns out, with good reason." "You don't understand," he began, his tone shifting to one of aggrieved justification. "I'm sick. The treatments—" "I know about the lymphoma," I interrupted. "I also know about Vanessa." That stopped him cold. For a moment, genuine shock registered on his face, the realization that his carefully constructed deceptions had completely unraveled. Then, astonishingly, his expression morphed into something resembling relief. A small, almost amused smile played at his lips. "Well, I suppose that simplifies things." "Simplifies?" I echoed, caught off guard by his reaction. "The divorce," he clarified, setting down the electronics box and regarding me with newfound directness. "Vanessa and I have been discussing next steps. This just accelerates the timeline." I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. "You plan to divorce me after stealing my money?" He shrugged, dropping all pretense. "Don't I deserve nice things, Prudence? After 15 years with your obsessive planning and risk management, do you have any idea how suffocating your caution has been?" For a moment, anger threatened to overwhelm my carefully maintained composure. Then I recalled Jonathan's advice. Let him talk. Every admission strengthens your case. So I simply watched as Mark continued his self-justifying monologue, explaining how he'd earned access to my savings through years of tolerating my controlling personality, how his illness and new relationship had shown him what really matters in life. All the while, he remained oblivious to the fact that the accounts he'd emptied contained only a fraction of my assets, and that every word he spoke was being recorded by the security system I'd upgraded months ago. When he finally ran out of excuses, I smiled calmly and reached for the folder on the coffee table. "You're right about one thing, Mark. This does simplify matters." "What's this?" Mark asked as I handed him the folder, wariness replacing his self-righteousness. "A comprehensive accounting of your fraud," I replied evenly. "Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers from accounts you gained access to through identity theft. Security footage of you stealing my financial information. Documentation of purchases you've made with stolen funds. And just for good measure, evidence of your affair with Vanessa, including those lovely photos from your Napa weekend that you charged to my compromised credit card." His face contorted with disbelief as he flipped through the meticulously organized evidence. "You've been tracking me all this time?" "I've been protecting myself, Mark. It's what I do professionally, remember? Identify risks and mitigate them before disaster strikes." I stood and walked to the built-in bookcase, sliding aside a decorative panel to reveal a wall safe he'd never known existed. "The accounts you accessed were decoys, containing less than 5% of my actual assets. My real accounts remain secure and untouched." "You set me up," he accused, his voice hollow. "No, Mark. I gave you enough rope to hang yourself, which you proceeded to do with remarkable enthusiasm." I removed a second folder from the safe. This contains the divorce papers my attorney has prepared, citing financial fraud and adultery. You'll note that I've been exceptionally generous given the circumstances. You keep your personal assets and retirement accounts. I keep mine. No alimony either direction. His eyes narrowed with sudden calculation. And if I refuse these terms? Then we moved to Plan B. I gestured toward the original folder. All of that evidence goes to the police, the district attorney, and your employer. Financial fraud involving this amount of money carries significant penalties, including potential prison time. Your medical condition might generate some sympathy, but the affair undercuts any claim that this was solely about healthcare costs. Mark's shoulders slumped as the full implications sank in. You've thought of everything. That's my job, I replied simply. The job you've always resented me for being good at. 1 month later, I sat in Jonathan's office for our final meeting. The divorce had been processed with surprising efficiency, and Mark had vacated our home without further dramatics. He didn't really have options, Jonathan observed, closing my file. The evidence was irrefutable. What did surprise me was the medical treatment plan he proposed to the court, Diane added. The actual costs were significantly lower than what he claimed when justifying his theft. I nodded, having already reached the same conclusion. He exaggerated the expenses to rationalize taking more than he needed. The cancer is real, but he's been using it as an excuse to finance his new life with Vanessa. The revelation should have hurt, but instead I felt only a detached sort of pity. Mark had constructed an elaborate justification for his betrayal, but at its core, his motivation was painfully mundane. A middle-aged man seeking excitement with a younger woman, willing to compromise his integrity and destroy his marriage in pursuit of that fantasy. Have you decided what you'll do with the house? Jonathan asked. I'm selling it. Too many memories, and frankly, I'm ready for a fresh start. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I've accepted a position with a firm in Portland, a significant promotion, actually. What I didn't mention was that the firm had been pursuing me for years, offers I'd always declined because Mark was established in Seattle. Another sacrifice I'd made for a marriage that had been slowly unraveling without my awareness. As I left Jonathan's office for the last time, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The tech company where Mark worked had announced significant layoffs amid an internal financial scandal. Mark's name appeared prominently in the article as one of the executives under investigation. I felt a moment of vindication, quickly followed by something more profound: indifference. Mark's future problems were no longer my concern. I had protected myself when it mattered most, and now I was free to build a new life, one founded on the self-reliance I'd always valued but had partially compromised in marriage. My mother had been right all along. Always have your own safety net. It was advice I would never again forget.